Cassandra, how are you?
I'm okay, Dr. George. I'm good. A
Yeah,
lot's happened.
it's been what, a couple of weeks since we last met.
It's been a few weeks, but something happened that I need to share with you.
Okay.
I think I told you, and I know I've told you, that I've been speaking a lot to Monsignor Ryan, and he and my sister in law have been wonderful encouragers. I went to register for the spring semester at Hostos College because I was able to get my GED while I was in jail. I went to register at Hostos. There was a crowd there, and I'm standing online minding my business, and somebody who knew my husband came up and yelled in front of everybody, "This woman is a murderer.
Oh my goodness.
She should not even be allowed to be out of jail, let alone in school." And I I stood still, and I wanted to react. And I thought to myself, no, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. You're not going to victimize me. I am sorry. Being a victim is what put me in jail. Instead of taking necessary steps, as I said, I killed my husband, and, I did my 20 years. We've discussed that. But she let everybody know. People looked at me, and inwardly, I thought, oh my goodness, this has to be one of the worst moments of my life. But I regained my dignity, and I ignored her like she was not even speaking to me, and I went through the motions. You're not going to do that to me anymore. I am not a victim. I am tired of being a victim, Dr. George. I am not doing that. No, I am going to go on. I don't care what obstacles are in my way, Dr. George. I am going to go on. I am going to get my degree, and I'm going to make something of myself. Nobody is going to be able to do that to me anymore.
Cassandra, I am so sorry that happened to you. I cannot imagine the humiliation
It was
of
beautiful.
something like that. Well, sure. I mean, you have this person that just comes out of the blue
Yeah.
and says that publicly in front of all these people.
Mhm.
So I am just amazed. So could we just slow that down? So she came up to you. How did you deal with that? I mean, what went through your mind?
What
And
went through my
yeah,
mind?
how did you deal with that shock?
What went through my mind? I'm not going to say the old Margaret. The old Margaret would have cowered. Um, the Margaret, the Cassandra would have cowered. I mean, I know that my Aunt Margaret had spent time in jail, and she always told me, Cassandra, this is what you do. This is how you act when people try to humiliate you. Um, that might have been, like I said, the old Cassandra. I just stood there. I stood there, Dr. George, and I ignored her by a force that was not my own, by a strength that could have only come from God. I just ignored her.
Yeah.
And she called out my name. This is Cassandra. She killed her husband. She had my entire litany. And I thought about my Aunt Margaret. And I said to him, I mean, I don't believe, obviously, in communicating with dead. That's spiritualism, which I will never become involved with. But I thought to myself, Aunt Margaret, if you were here, what would you have told me to do? And I said, you know something? I am going to be dignified, and I'm going to ignore her. And people were looking at me.
Yeah.
People were in shock.
Yeah.
She was very loud, and she said she's a murderer. She should not even be out of jail. She killed her husband. Why is she here on your taxpayer dollars? Of course, I wanted to go through the floor, but I just stood straight, and I continued on to register as if I had not even heard what she had to say.
You, you know, Cassandra, that takes so much courage. And I believe you. I think if this was the Cassandra that 20 years ago would have been a totally different experience. So so again, so where did you get the strength from? I know you felt that your aunt was speaking to you. You mentioned God, and that's really incredible. So out of all that, how did that help you at that moment when the natural thing would have been then just to run? How did that help you?
What had happened was I thought of my Aunt Margaret, and I thought what she would have said had she been next to me, which would have been, Cassandra, you're better than that. They spoke about Jesus, they're going to speak about you. Just hold your head up high. And then I said, Monsignor has just been so amazing with me. My sister in law has been amazing. I had a choice, Dr. George. I could either run out of the building, which, of course, naturally, that was my first inclination, or I could have just stood straight and said, you know something, Cassandra? These are obstacles you will face along the way. Get used to it. And I decided, Cassandra, do what you have to do, get used to it. And I ignored the shocks of, the shock expressions of the people around me. And I know, listen, Dr. George, school is due to start in February.
Okay.
I'm sure people are not going to forget that. And maybe I will not make a lot of friends in college, but I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to move on with my life. If people want to speak to me, that's amazing. But I plan to tell my story. If there is an outlet in college, I'm going to be very honest. Why should I hide? This Listen, killing my husband was obviously not the thing to do. But let's be honest, Dr. George, it was part of my life. It happened. I could either let it weigh me down as an anchor, or I can allow it to construct my life in a positive manner, as impossible as that may seem.
Yeah.
I'm not the old Cassandra anymore. I am so battle weary of being kicked around, begging for my children's forgiveness,
Yeah.
begging for my own forgiveness. I said, no, that's not happening.
The last time we spoke, you talked about having so much guilt. I mean, how difficult it was, and then, and then your children's reaction and their anger towards you, because it's obvious, being that you're the parent and they've lost their father, it's natural that they'll project their anger on you. And so you sound like at that time you're in a very difficult spot, but then something has happened. I just find it amazing. Since the last time we spoken to now, something has happened. Would you mind just talking about that? What happened? What changed in your mind from being in a place of despair to a place of hope?
I've been reading the Bible,
Okay.
and I've been focusing a lot on the Apostle Paul, on St. Paul. As horrific as his actions were, God not only forgave him, God used him. He's not a respecter of persons. What he did with St. Paul, he can do with Cassandra. And I said, Cassandra, you have a choice. You could either remain beaten down and do nothing with your life, or you can use the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, as an example and move on with your life. That's a hurdle, Dr. George. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm just, was a housewife that I'm saying, oh, now I'm going to go to school. I had a very, very checkered past.
Yeah.
But I can't. I've been reading the Word, and the Word has really grown within me. I am not going to be a victim. I'm just not. I am battle weary of that. I'm not doing that anymore. I just developed a strength, especially at that moment when she began to scream the litany as to what Cassandra had done. And I thought to myself, Cassandra, you could knock her out. You could do that. Um, you could fight back, you can argue, or you could just ignore her and maintain your dignity. That, Dr. George, was the hardest of all.
Yeah.
But that's what I opted for.
Yeah.
I said, no, I am going to be dignified. I don't care who looks at me. They knew my record. When I applied to Hostos, I was very honest with the counselor, and I told her, I said, I'm here to change my life. So it's not like I just went in there saying, oh, I was like a Class A student who
Yeah.
just took a very lengthy break. No, that's not it. I believe in honesty, because if not, it comes back, when you lie, it comes back to bite you.
Yeah. Casandra, I think that's just phenomenal. So if we can, I know what really pained you the most were your children,
Yes.
and some of your thoughts about them and where you would move forward. So with this new view of yourself, how do you see yourself moving forward with your kids?
I continue to pray. I am not going to give you any cliches about my children. What I did was horrific. And yes, taking out their father, and also, too, the situation that I left them in. And I understand why they feel the way that they do. Does it grieve me? Of course it grieves me. It's very grievous. But again, if I continue to focus on that, I'll never move on with my life. Look, God gives us one chance at life, one chance. Okay, I mean, there is a lot that I had heard while I was in prison. And I know I have one friend that says, oh, you never die. You know, you can be reincarnated. No, I know what the Lord says. And yes, I will have to stand before him. Yes, I will have to account for everything that I've done. But I am determined that this life that he has so graciously allowed me to have, I'm going to make something of myself.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if my felony conviction will prohibit me from going on for a doctorate and becoming a professional psychologist. If I'm going to do something, Dr. George, I've decided I'm going all the way.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Wow. I'm just here absorbing your message and just thinking about what has happened, and so you talked about the future. So where do you see yourself? I mean, if you had the power to kind of create your future, where do you see yourself going? Who do you see yourself impacting? Um, what are your thoughts about your future?
I see myself as a professional, as a doctor. I see myself as a professional, as a doctor, as a PhD, Dr. Casandra, and ministering to women who are in my situation. You know, Dr. George, you and I had spoken a couple of weeks ago, and I had told you, like, when people say to you, well, I understand. No, you don't understand. Again, and you and I, had conversed about that. Unless you've been in that situation, you could never understand. But I have been. And I think I could be such an asset to women, particularly women who are abused, women who are behind bars, who are incarcerated, because I could tell them, listen, I was there, and this is what I did.
Yeah.
And that's where I see myself. I see myself, as impossible as it may appear, I see myself as a professional.
I think that's wonderful. So you've spoken to Monsignor since we last spoke, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me, what are some of his thoughts and his feedback with where you are now, and how has that been helpful?
It's been helpful. I mean, obviously, he was the first one that I spoke to after that humiliating incident. And I told him about Margaret, about my Aunt Margaret. And it's funny, he said something interesting. He said, you know something, Cassandra, I understand why thinking of your Aunt Margaret would bring you maybe some comfort, what she would tell you to do, and that's wonderful. He said, but think of where God has brought you. He brought it right back to God. He said, don't think about the old Aunt Margaret. Don't think about any of that. Think about where God has brought Cassandra and where God is going to lead Cassandra despite every horrific thing that ever happened to her.
Yeah.
And he's been, oh my goodness, I mean, he's been like my greatest ally. He and my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
They have just been amazing. I had shared with you, I mean, housing is no issue because my sister-in-law said you can live here for as long as you wish. And that's a big help. But I am going to get a job. Whatever job I can get, I am going to get a job. I don't want to be dependent on government assistance. If I have to stock shelves, if I have to, whatever it is that's legal, obviously,
Yeah.
um, I will do it. And I will go to college. I am going to get my degree. My focus is that PhD. My focus, and it's not so, yes, of course, it's on the completion of my education, but it's being in that position to help others.
Yeah.
I have a yearning that I want to help others. And you know something, Dr. George, that situation, as humiliating as it was at registration, that did help in one sense.
Okay. How so?
Because, again, sometimes when you think that things cannot become any more horrific or humiliating, something else happens, but not responding showed Cassandra how strong Cassandra can be.
Yeah. That's a great point.
I mean, look, I wanted to knock her out, let's be honest.
Yeah, with your 20 years of penitentiary experience, I'm sure you probably learned some skills on how to survive.
Yes,
It would have been easy, right?
it would have been very easy, but what was the point? The
Yeah.
college may not have accepted me.
Yeah.
I may have been arrested
Yeah.
because whatever she said, she did not use physical violence.
Yeah.
And I think it was almost like she was anticipating or hoping that I would start something, that I would take a swing at her.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not doing that.
You know, it's interesting. You know, where there's a good, where there's light, there's always darkness.
Yeah.
Right? So where there's good, there's always evil.
Yeah.
How does good and evil tie into what you experienced when she walked up to you? Is there any way would that kind of tie into that? I mean, what was good and what was evil? If you could think along those lines.
What was good is that, well, there were two things that were good. Number one, I was there to do something constructive
Right.
with my life. And also, two, any false ideas that I had about myself blending in, the good is that I was forced to face reality.
Yeah.
This may happen again. Dr. George, I may see her again. Yes, this is New York City, but I may very well see her again.
Yeah.
She could embarrass me again. But the good is that I learned how to control myself. And I just stood there. Again, I was very quiet. I was very dignified. And if she did not keep pointing to me and screaming, people may not have known who she was speaking about. Yes, she was talking about me. But again, I just maintained my dignity. I continued what I had to do. I registered and I walked out. Of course, I called Monsignor, but...
Good for you. So what was evil in that?
The evil was that necessary? I did 20 years. I'm trying to rebuild my life. Did you really find it necessary to humiliate me like that? Why? I mean, why did you find that necessary? I'm here rebuilding my life. Yeah. And you obviously think that my life is garbage.
Yeah.
And again, the old Cassandra, when I say the old Cassandra, I meant, prior to jail, the old Cassandra would have cowered.
Yeah.
The old Cassandra would have just run out of the building. But that's the old Cassandra, not now. That's not happening. Nobody is going to stop me with what I have to do.
You brought up a very good point. The reason I was asked about good and evil, just from that experience, we see that even when you choose to do good, there may be attacks, there may be spiritual attacks. And it sounds like you kind of recognize that as being part of the journey, that there will be spiritual attacks. There will be attacks on you and you mentioned a word that it doesn't make sense. It's kind of like what you're saying. Some things just happen that just don't make any sense. That's always the question. And why did this happen to me? People say, and sometimes there's just no explanation. Sometimes evil just happens, right?
Yes, evil can happen.
Yeah.
Evil can definitely happen. Um, I mean, again, I committed a crime. I get that. I acknowledge that. I paid with 20 years.
Yeah.
But you have, and I'm not saying that, oh, my husband deserved it, although what my husband did precipitated that.
Yeah.
But Dr. George, this is New York City. You have people that are minding their business, walking down the block, and somebody will just mug them, kill them,
Exactly.
assault them. So
Exactly.
yes, that's unwarranted evil. Did I feel that I deserved that what she did? I didn't.
Right.
But I have to deal with it, don't I?
Good for you, Cassandra. I think that's the key. This is really fantastic. Just from the illustration, you're talking about that you live your life, but then evil occurs, and we don't understand why. But at the same time, you found a way to integrate that unfortunate experience into your future. It has changed your path. That doesn't mean that your hope has stopped. You brought up something else about your aunt, and I was not aware that there was history in your family of people
It
being
was.
incarcerated.
I had an Aunt Margaret.
And some people talk about generational um,
Curses.
curses or patterns of behavior. What is it that you felt that you're able to do that your aunt was not able to do? I mean, how does this fit into maybe changing the generational stuff? Do you see how your experience may be a path to healing to stop the cycle of abuse? So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Margaret, my Aunt Margaret, did not have anyone encouraging her.
Yeah,
And I praise God that I do.
yeah,
I have my sister in law, I have Monsignor Ryan, I have you. And Aunt Margaret, she was not in that time period where a woman really sought to advance herself. It was like she came out of jail, which was unfortunate, and she lived her life at the mercy of others. She lived her life at the mercy of family.
yeah,
The only thing I do hope, Dr. George, and I'll be honest, is that I don't have any classes with this individual. I mean, if I were to sit in a class and she were to bring something up, I would imagine, I would hope that the professor would be intuitive enough to just say to her, no, sorry, this doesn't go, not in my classroom. And if it doesn't, I'm sure I can go to the school authorities.
yeah,
I'm sure there's some advocate. And there's also online options.
yeah,
She
yeah,
can't, and she cannot violate my online classes.
yeah. Good for you. Because now you're talking about what you could possibly do to keep yourself safe and to maintain your dignity. And who knows, from this experience, you may teach other people that may feel victimized and what they can do to,
Yes,
to deal with people that may be emotionally inappropriate or perpetrators.
yes.
Good for you.
I just, Dr. George, I was proud of myself. I wasn't happy that that happened,
Yeah,
being honest, but I was very proud of the way that I handled it. Again, that I did not cower, that I stood up straight and thought to myself, no, you're not getting away with this. I'm going to ignore you, and I don't care what you yell. Go look like a fool because I'm ignoring you. And that's exactly what transpired.
well,
I know, look, let's be honest, it's going to be a rough journey. I'm not an 18-year-old who came from an amazing family that my college is paid for. And I have, yes, of course, I have my future ahead of me, but I'm not that 18-year-old, scholastic genius. I'm, I'm a middle aged woman who's starting out all over again.
yeah,
But I want to speak to women in my situation. Again, it's imperative that they hear from someone who's been through it all, not from someone who's sitting across the table to say, I know how you feel. No, Charlie, you have no idea how I feel. You've not been there, and if you've not been there, please hush your mouth.